Now here's Richard.
How many people in America and Canada and the world can't talk? It's millions of people, and one man has made a big difference, and his name is Mr. Bruce Baker. Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Hello, Richard.
Nice to see you. You look so happy. I can't believe you ever taught Greek and Latin.
Yes, I did. For many years, I taught Greek and Latin.
What makes somebody becomes a Greek and Latin teacher?
I wanted to read Aristotle, Plato, and figure out the nature of the universe.
And what happened?
I gave it up for Lent.
Now, you are a linguist.
Yes.
You went to school to be a linguist. You've taught languages.
Yes.
So you understand. How many languages do you speak?
I speak several. I think most linguists speak several languages, but there are only one or two that they feel at home with. I taught for a year in a French public high school, which gives me a kind of a special insight into that language.
So taking you to Europe would just be the best thing in the whole world.
I'd like it.
Now you're an inventor.
Yes.
You had the knowledge of the language, and you had a dream. Why did you want to help all those people out there who cannot talk?
I was doing research for my doctoral dissertation, and it was about language involved with people who had physical disabilities. And I got to meet several people who couldn't talk, and I saw that they used language boards, but these language boards didn't seem to have much power. Because if you're paralyzed either through Lou Gehrig's disease or through cerebral palsy or through an automobile accident,
MS?
and multiple sclerosis, or any number of reasons, and you can't speak owing to this paralysis, and you try to type, even if you can use a hand, one letter at a time, it's very slow to say anything. So I wanted to put some linguistic power behind people's communication who were paralyzed.
So as an inventor, you created language in a box.
Well, as it were, I created a way to get language out of a box. Other people had put language in a box, but the only way to get it out was so slow that many people couldn't use it.
Tell me the name of this machine.
Well, it's called a touch talker, and my special contribution to it is called Minspeak, for minimum effort speech. And that's a way of using pictures in sequences to form sentences that the computer then puts out in the form of speech.
So you can really take, it's portable, you can really take this just about anywhere.
Well, it only weighs about 5 pounds. And this is one form of it. There are other forms that use lights that people can actually use by special switches that will enable someone who can only just move an eyebrow to be able to access the equipment.
Why don't you show our viewers how this works?
Well, let me just take, for example, here. If we would take this, let me turn it on, and this little picture of a lightning bolt, and I would sequence with that with a picture of an apple. That might mean fast food. And lightning bolt, apple, and say, a cup running over might mean,
I would like a Coca-Cola, please.
I would like a Coca-Cola, please.
Does it say, I would like a diet Coca-Cola, please?
Well, we could certainly get that in there. It would be just, then the individual can put his own language in.
So by pressing these little signs, which are also the alphabet, you have little shoes, little dice, boy, girl. You can combine them with others to give you a theme.
Yes.
And then from the theme, you can get sentences.
That's correct. Or you can generate individual words, such as apple, and verb becomes
Eat.
Eat. And then telephone and verb is
Say.
Say.
And you can also do a little bit more complex things, such as I, and Father Time becomes
I used to.
I see.
Or you and lightning bolt might mean
You have to.
or
Doesn't she have to?
it enables you to generate language with a minimum
How
of
did you
strokes.
feel when you created this? I mean, I have seen the other boards out there, and, you know, people in wheelchairs, and as they press to things, or some of them are not computerized, they just, you have to point to a word, or you have to point to letters, and people have to remember how many letters you point. How did you feel? Do you remember the first person who used this?
Yes, I do, and I remember it was in 1982, and it was a very exciting moment. And but just conceiving of something and then getting it implemented was a long struggle, and what we're now doing is learning how to use it for different groups of people, because communication disability is very democratic. You can be a company president and become communicatively disabled. You can be a housewife and become communicatively disabled. You can be a little child. and the language needs of those different groups can be radically different, and how they relate to the access methods is a whole science, and that's called augmentative communication.
Never in our history have you seen so many commercials on television about illiteracy, about so many people who cannot read, and how you cannot get anywhere in this world unless you read. And this, to me, the same is true for somebody who cannot talk. How could you not have this? I mean, this is the most state-of-the-art, up-to-date way of creating a conversation with one person who does not talk.
Well, it's a necessity. A few years ago, it was very difficult for a person to be funded for an electric wheelchair. And now I think everybody who needs an electric wheelchair has established funding means for getting an electric wheelchair. And now we're on the verge of having that happen with communication systems.
So maybe one day this will be a totally funded project.
In some states it already is, and in other states that's coming, either through insurance, through the schools, or through special medical funds.
So let's say someone right out there watching us has a child who cannot speak, or that they can't speak themselves. And they're seeing this and they're going, this is a miracle. How could I possibly get one? How does one go about getting this?
Well, one would definitely be in contact with the speech pathologist or the special education department in the school in which your child is attending. There's also an 800 line number for the American Speech and Hearing Association, whose headquarters is in Rockville. And there's a wonderful organization called ISAC, which stands for International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. And ISAC is going to have a convention this fall in Anaheim, California. And perhaps as many as 1,000 professionals from all over the world will be there discussing and debating means and techniques for augmenting people's communication. So any of these organizations could be helpful, but your school is your first resource. Your physician may be a resource if you have, say, Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS.
You've taken people who have had this problem. I mean, it certainly is a problem when you can't communicate. I mean, our whole world is based on communication. And you told me a wonderful story about someone who uses this machine.
Yes, there's a gentleman right now in Pittsburgh who is using this device, set up in a way very similar to this, who's now working for the Westinghouse Electric Corporation. And his sole means of communication with his professional colleagues is through this device. And he has been unable to speak all of his life. And now he is able to have conversation that is within the range of normal conversation, such that professionals can interact with him and that he can interact with professionals without them having to watch him spell very slowly.
When you see a child or an adult use your machine, Bruce, what goes through your mind? What do you feel? I mean, it's got to be such a high for you.
It's a mixture of hope and thrill and anxiety, because I want to learn better how to implement the system so it can meet the needs more than it's meeting now. It's a science, augmentative communication, and we're just at its very beginning. It's kind of a 21st century science, and enormous strides have been made. And right now, the real struggle is how to apply the technology we have at this day. And that's a struggle that's probably going to carry us into the next century.
What about the people out there who can't talk and they go, oh, I don't need to talk, I can write things down on paper, and oh, I could never learn this, and they just get negative. What would you say to them?
I would say that voice output makes communication much more vital and gives a person a wider range of people he can interact with, and that communication through electronic augmentation requires concentration and it requires effort. It's much like a guitar. Do you know how much fun it is to play? And it's the same kind of thing. It does require effort, but the payoff is superb.
I see these little wheels spinning in your head. You are an inventor now. You're in the category of, oh, Leonardo da Vinci and all of those people that created things. You are. What is your next thing? What's the next thing you want to do? I'm sure that you are working, because there's so many questions. How can I make this better? How can I make more words? How can I make it easier? But what's step 2 for you?
Very few things. I'll tell you, the history of technology is usually that something happens for people who are able-bodied, and then that is transformed to be put at the service of people who have disabilities. But here's a basic idea. It's a fundamental type of technology. It's a way of interacting with language data that was developed for people who are physically or cognitively impaired. And there is a good possibility that this kind of technology is going to be used for databases and to develop a translator, such that when the language we put in, rather than coming out in English, will come out in a foreign language. And that's a very interesting way of technology transfer usually flows in the opposite direction. This may be another kind of example where it flows from a technology developed for people who have disabilities and that it affects people who are able-bodied.
Thanks.
Okay. Very
Thanks
nice
for
talking with you.
inventing this. Thanks for caring so much about these challenged people. And we look forward to seeing this in 10 languages.
Thank you, Richard.